Hello and welcome. I will give folks an additional minute and a half, and we will get started right at 2:02. Welcome, everyone. And again, welcome to the December installment of our monthly webinar series hosted by the Hunt Institute. I am Dr. Waverly Wissenant. I'm the Deputy Director of Higher Education at the Hunt Institute. The Institute is a national nonprofit dedicated to supporting and advising education leaders and policymakers nationwide on education issues across the education continuum. For this session, according to the National Student Clearinghouse, college transfer grew 5.3% in the start of fall 2023. Transfers make up 13.2% of the undergraduate student body, yet the process to transfer both laterally and upwards hold many challenges for students, from difficult application processes, credit not transferring over, to difficulty integrating in campus life and other obstacles. So part of our discussion today will answer how can we aid these students, and this discussion also aims to tackle the answer all around to what our students are grappling with as they transfer to our wonderful campuses. So today we also have 3 experts from around the country who will help us examine how we can better support our transfer students. First, we have Alexa Richards, who directs the Bridge program to Clemson, the Bridge to Clemson program and transfer programs at Clemson University. Our next resource expert is Rick Clark, the Executive Director of Strategic Student Access at Georgia Tech University. And finally, we have David Lenore from the National College Attainment Network, who will be our moderator. So let me introduce our moderator, David Lenore. Being a first-generation college graduate and former Pell Grant recipient, David Lenore takes the work of college access and attainment seriously. Noting the rampant educational inequity in his home community, David has fought to change those conditions in urban and rural school districts alike for the last 17 years. Now with the National College Attainment Network, David is excited to support and ignite professionals nationwide to do the same in those communities that they serve. David brings a wealth of knowledge and excitement surrounding the conversation of transfer students and supporting their attainment. David, thank you so much for being here today. And now let me pass the floor to you.
Hi, welcome, and good afternoon. Thank you so much, Dr. Wissenant. Today, we are here to discuss the state of community college transfers in America, critical issue for both students and institutions. Community colleges serve as a vital gateway to higher education, offering affordable, which is very important in this economic space right now, and accessible pathways to academic success. Yet, despite the importance of the transfer process, both horizontally to other community colleges and vertically to four-year universities, this remains complex and often fragmented. The Community College Research Center at Columbia University reported this year that across the U.S., 16% of community college students transfer and earn a bachelor's degree within 6 years. When aggregated for income, only 11% of low-income students complete in 6 years. When aggregated by race, 13% of Hispanic and 9% of Black students complete within 6 years. For the third of community college students that successfully transfer, the barriers they face seem to be overwhelming. We know there are economic and social issues that plague all of our students, but educators do have the control over what happens in-house, such as transfer policies, advising support, and processes of verifying credits. Horizontal transfers can involve navigating between institutions with different curricula and support systems, while vertical transfers to universities often come with concerns about credit transferability and admissions requirements. As we discuss these challenges today, it's essential to recognize the need for clear pathways, more robust advising, and greater collaboration between community colleges and universities. Only then can we ensure that community college students have the opportunities they deserve to advance in their education and careers. I definitely want to make sure that you catch that from these wonderful speakers today. So I do want to introduce our first speaker. Um, First, we have Alexa Richards. Oh man, I am completely down on my notes. Thank you. Alexa serves as the director of Bridge to Clemson program and transfer programs at Clemson University. She partners with Tri-County Technical College to oversee orientation and onboarding initiatives, academic success, and academic recovery initiatives to support incoming Bridge to Clemson students, as well as incoming traditional transfer students. As a former transfer student herself, Alexa is passionate about helping people find their path towards academic success and personal growth. She strives to support students through various career avenues, i.e., counseling, advising, soft skill, and leadership development training, and program management to reach their highest potential and achieve the personal and professional goals. Thank you so much for joining us, Alexa. So our first question to you is, how has the Bridge to Clemson program addressed the unique needs of transfer students, and what lessons can other institutions take from its success?
Thank you so much for having me, David. We really appreciate the opportunity. Um, so if folks are not familiar with the Bridge to Clemson program, this is a unique transfer pathway in which students apply to Clemson University and get a guaranteed admission to Clemson for their sophomore year. The program is designed in a way that they take their entire first year's worth of courses at our local technical college. It's only 4 miles down the road, but they get an immersive residential experience and live on Clemson's campus. So in regards to your question, the biggest thing that other institutions can take from us and try and emulate as well with their students is this connection and communication between the two institutions. This partnership would not work if we did not have access to resources at both institutions. We also design our curriculum where we have curriculum worksheets for both of our students where it shows what the technical college calls the class, what Clemson calls the class. And the biggest component is the guaranteed admission. They have to complete at least 30 credits and a 2.5 GPA for successful transfer. But after they do that, there's no reapplication process. There's no extra legwork involved. We assist them through start to finish the process. Our program has a counterpart bridge office at the technical college, and we have resources and advisors on both sides of the team. We also do our own orientation and all of our academic recovery efforts. So everything that is ingrained in the program is a direct buy-in from both institutions to see the success of our students. And so when our students are working with a Tri-County advisor, they know what the bridge curriculum is. If they're working with their Clemson advisor to talk about, I might want to study abroad or do other things in their sophomore or junior year, they have access to the advisors in that regard as well. So we have a lot of different ways that we connect both institutions, but there is buy-in from the top down and everyone in between. And we also are looking at that integration piece. We want to see the social wellness. And so we believe that it's a holistic development. And so we connect them with housing and clubs and organizations and things like that, that help them really feel integrated and stay in the community.
That is wonderful.
David, I think you're muted. I'm sorry.
I apologize. That was wonderful. Thank you. I hope everyone caught that. I now want to introduce Rick Clark. Rick Clark is Georgia Tech's inaugural Executive Director for Strategic Student Success. In this role, he directs the Institute's efforts to position Tech as a national leader for return on investment and equitable outcomes for students from all financial backgrounds. For 15 years, Rick led Tech's undergraduate admissions team, serving as the AVP and executive director. Under his leadership, the Institute dramatically increased the brand awareness, improved overall academic class profile, and extended the strategic enrollment goals. Rick, thank you for being here today. So my first question to you, Rick, is at Georgia Tech, what strategies have proven most effective in improving transfer student retention and integration into campus life?
Sure. Well, again, thanks so much for the opportunity to join y'all. And, as Alexa was talking, we've looked over the years a lot at Clemson's bridge program. So that's certainly an exemplar, and glad to continue to learn more about that. I would say, in a lot of ways, like the concept around retention and integration has benefited purely from volume. Georgia Tech, has continued to grow as an institution, but that's certainly also been true on the transfer side. So right now, 1 out of every 4 of our incoming undergrads are transfer students. So that just simple presence, that large in, has an impact on people paying attention. And so, our strategy has continued to be, all right, we want to expand access to more people from more backgrounds at more points and enroll students not just through one front door, but through multiple doors to get them ultimately off the same stage at the end. And I will say, as we've leaned into transfer, and we've grown about 62% on transfer in the last 5 years. So we're enrolling about 1,400 transfer students. Retention and graduation rates have actually been increasing during that time of growth. And that isn't always true in every case. But I do think that in many ways, because of the presence and because of the volume, there's been so much attention paid to transfer students. So I'll just start by saying that. The other thing I would just point to specifically is that for a long time, we've had a freshman seminar class called GT 1000, which is an introductory to Georgia Tech kind of class. I teach this myself. We talk with students a lot about, finding support on campus, building a network among your peers and among older students, and even looking towards the future and actually connecting with alums from the very first semester they arrive on campus. We do course mapping with them as well. But for a long time, that did not exist for transfer students. There was no GT 2000 until we created it just a couple of years ago. And that has really been a game changer in many ways, because that course is focused and centered on ensuring that students walk out of there not only knowing very well the students in their actual class and having connection with their instructors and some of the people supporting it, but also are immediately understanding where are those key places on campus. Part of the course integrates them understanding where's the career services office, where's the health center, where is it that they can go in order to get assistance with tutoring, and making sure they're fully aware of all the wraparound services that exist for them. So that's been huge. And then more recently, in the last 2 years in particular, we have been able to hire several transfer-centered and transfer-focused success coaches who are there, for all transfer students that are coming in at any point, not just in their first semester, but, at any point during their tech career, to sit down and talk with them about, as advisors certainly do this within their major, but they have another person that they can talk to about some of the decisions they're making with course choice. Georgia Tech's got a very big co-op and internship program. So how are they going to maybe juggle some work experience with their course studies, that kind of thing. And then I guess the last thing I would point to is, and this just speaks to the concept of the university treating, I guess, or viewing transfer students the way they view all students. But again, like thinking about our honors program or some of our living learning communities, like we have a Women in Science and Technology house. We have an international house for students, not that are from abroad, that have an international focus and desire to learn more about various cultures. And for many years, that was not something that we promoted or even allowed transfer students to initially apply into. But creating these sort of smaller cohorts, but then also just purely integrating transfer students into the same opportunities that we do our first year students, has really made a big difference. And it is absolutely leaning towards, and showing correlative to higher retention rates, higher GPA, and better graduation rates.
Thank you for that. That was very good, very good. I hope people are taking notes. I also see that, there are still some space. There's still some space for Q&A. So definitely make sure that you get your questions over. Now, I did want to bounce it to the both of you all. This question is about, is there some sort of student feedback that you all made actionable is there something that you responded to for all of those different actions that you produced? For instance, you mentioned including the international students when you didn't before. Was there something from the students that you that initiated this, or was there something from staff that initiated this?
Sure. Alexa, you want to go first?
Sure, I can go first. So I should say that the Bridge program is just over 1,100 students right now. So we do operate as if we are our own small little academic college. And when the program started 18 years ago, it started with about 200 students. So our commitment was always to have students live on campus, but as the program grew and grew, we had to move off campus for a while. We just couldn't keep up with the demand. And the feedback that we consistently got when the students were living off campus was they don't feel connected. They feel outside of that community. So we made it a priority to move the students back onto campus to help them feel more integrated into campus. On the flip side, they also wanted to see options for them to live and be well on both campuses. So they wanted dining plans that were going to work at both campuses. So now they have access to a dining plan that allows them to eat on both campuses. They have access to pretty much everything at Clemson except walking onto a D1 sport and doing fraternity and sorority life. They can join all of the clubs and do all of the different organizations and things like that. So when we're looking at the success of our students, we're looking at the academic initiatives, but we're also looking at the holistic wellness of the student. And those were two key pieces that they really wanted to see over the past couple of years that we were able to make happen. And our students are a lot more integrated into campus, and they're more visible on campus because we've had 18 years of the program. You talk to a student on Clemson's campus, and about 1 in 18 or 1 in 10 students are going to be going to have started their journey in the Bridge program. And so we have a high success rate, and our students feel a part of campus even before they actually enroll in a Clemson class for their sophomore year.
Yeah, I would say, in terms of one of the things I actually, already addressed that was initiated by students, I would point to the GT 2000 course. That's something that students said, look, a fourth of our students now are coming in through this other pathway as transfer students. And this is clearly a great class that has, an ability to start students off on the right foot. We'd like that also. So the GT 2000 would be one. The other thing that that students brought up is representation within student government, specifically for transfer students. So we had a grad student, for instance, a grad president and then a representation with SGA. But on the undergrad side, that wasn't specifically set aside to have transfer voice within SGA. And that's really an important opportunity, I think, and something to be intentional and cognizant of is, that sort of ability to speak right into decisions that are being made, priorities that are being set aside, and future vision. And so I think that is something that came from students. That is something that I feel like was a great decision, and something that, obviously now on an ongoing basis allows for a mechanism or a conduit of continued advocacy or awareness of various issues that might be more specific to students who are transferring in versus those that started as first years or on the grad side.
Thank you for that. That was very helpful. My next question is, what is the single most impactful change institutions? So this is just, some actual thought for who may be on today. What is the single most impactful change institutions can make to remove barriers and improve the overall experience for transfer students from application to graduation? Alexa, I'll start with you.
I would say that if you're considering wanting to start a program like the Bridge to Clemson program, ensuring that you have that connection and investment from both institutions. There are bridge programs around the country that are a summer experience, but a lot of that is driven by sometimes the four-year institution. And that happens after the students get admitted and all of that. The Bridge to Clemson program, however, is a full investment from both institutions, and it's beneficial to both institutions. The technical college has guaranteed enrollment. Clemson has guaranteed enrollment for their transfer pool. And so it's a mutually beneficial experience, but it also means that there is a ton of legwork. How does the money go back and forth? How do you make sure that the students gain access to resources at both campuses? Do your faculty and your advisors have capacity to meet with the students? So these are all things that we've over the years had to think about and tweak. One of the recent things that we've run into is some struggles with our calculus classes. And so we have worked over the past couple of years to get an HHMI grant together so that we are evaluating our calculus courses and how we can better align curriculum so that when the students come over, if they're not finished with their calculus sequence, they're able to pick up where they left off and keep going in their progress. So no matter what, I think any type of program like this is going to recommend and require investment from both sides of the institutions. We have an annual memorandum of understanding that gets signed by both presidents so that there is dedicated commitment because there's a lot of moving pieces. And when you think one thing will impact one campus, in the grand scheme of things, sometimes it's hard to remember, oh yeah, we got to ask Bridge how this will impact Tri-County. And so having two directors that work with the Bridge program on each campus, talking to each other regularly, and for the sake of the student, they oftentimes don't recognize who works at Tri-County and who works at Clemson. So when I talk about my colleagues, I'm often talking about people that I don't technically work with because they work at a whole other institution, but those are very much my colleagues, and I see them just as much as I do my colleagues in my office here at Clemson. So having that investment, having that hubris that there's not one side of the partnership kind of taking the lead more than the other is a huge aspect of it as well. So it's a fine-tuned machine that needs constant revision and assessment so that we can be meeting the demands of our students. We all know that our students post-COVID need much different things, and the way they're interacting with people, the way that parents are interacting with people are very different. So we've had to reassess how we're engaging with our students, and that definitely requires both sides of the partnership to come to the table and talk about it.
Yeah, I mean, I think Alexa alluded to this if she didn't actually kind of weave that into her comments, but just to like put a spotlight on it, I would say the biggest change or the most important thing, in my opinion, for transfer students, whether it be an articulated program like Bridge or just a quote unquote regular transfer student who's looking to matriculate to a university, is just very clear, very easy to navigate, locate, and have actionable articulation of credits. Understanding what it is I'm taking here and exactly how is that going to fit into the institution that I'm transferring to. And then going a step further, how does that map ultimately to my degree there? And I think that most universities probably that are on the call or just even around the country, if you were to ask them about that, they would probably say, well, we've got this one pretty good, but maybe not as much on this side, right? Everybody can improve in this regard, but for a transfer student that I also, did transfer myself, so I kind of understand this very personally, and work with a lot of transfer students as well. They've been investing their time, they've been investing their money, they've been investing, all kinds of effort into this. And whether they are just about to come over or that's their plan and they're just getting started, knowing that there's a specific correlation to what it is I'm doing here and how this not only moves me over to that institution, but moves me to the degree is just critical. And so I would say that is by far the most important thing, the biggest change or the biggest priority that students or that institutions should have to serve transfer students well and to serve themselves well, because that ultimately leads to retention rates, graduation rates, student success.
That is great. I believe we can switch over to the Q&A. So just with the first question I see here, could the panelists speak to their organization's process for accepting college credit level GED scores?
Rick, I'll let you start.
Yeah, I guess, I'm thinking about, I guess we're talking about specifically transfer students in this regard, sounds like. The way Georgia Tech transfer credits set up, and I can in a bit here, but I can probably pop that into the chat. But it is really all about like courses that a student has taken at another institution. We're not extremely flexible beyond that. So, when it comes to any type of credit that a student is going to ultimately be awarded at Georgia Tech, that's coming from prior course credit at a different institution, be that a 2-year, be that a 4-year. That is sort of the way our whole map is set up and the expectations that we have to demonstrate kind of competency, award credit, and help that student to be admitted to Tech.
Yeah, in regards to Clemson, especially for transfers, we do the same. We do have a special website called the Transfer Course Equivalency List, where our students can put in prior credit from another institution to see how it might transfer. And all of our different academic colleges have their curriculum published so that a student can compare the courses they're coming in with, things like that. I think in regards to the GED aspect, Clemson does use that as a consideration for admission. They do have to submit it through the SRAR portal, and it allows them to be considered. Clemson is a test optional institution, so we do also make that a point where students see Clemson as a more accessible option, because a lot of folks aren't great standardized test takers, and that's okay. So I would say in terms of the transfer aspect, though, being as clear as possible, like Rick had said, about what courses transfer, and that is a national catalog that allows them to see any prior student who's ever transferred credit from another institution. What is it? How does it transfer? And we do have individual course evaluators for each academic college that can be more specific and dive into course equivalencies or exemptions, exceptions, things like that that might apply.
Okay. The next question is kind of related, and I would encourage you to, focus maybe more on the advising aspects, like some of the little things that you all do. But the how do you ensure that the 2+2 programs actually equal 4 for the student?
Alexa, you want to go ahead on that and then I'll pick up from there?
Sure. Well, for Bridge to Clemson specifically, it's more a 1+3 program, because our Bridge students take their entire first year at Tri-County Technical College, and then they go over to Clemson. And I will say that for some programs, it doesn't necessarily equal 4. For our engineers, for example, we almost always tell them it's going to take 5 or 6 because they want to see a co-op or something, some type of internship component that's a part of their degree progress. One way that we really try to align the curriculum with Tri-County Tech, though, is examining and talking to the advisors regularly about students that they're seeing and what is not transferring. We have specifically designed curriculum worksheets for all of our students, like I said, that have what Clemson calls it, what Tri-County calls it, how it fits in their general education curriculum. So as long as students are following the sheet, they should be finding things that transfer with them. Now, it does depend on students' test scores in terms of where they place for English and math and things like that. But if they're on track for all of those things, they should be ticking things off and, marking each box to make sure that things go well. We also, like I said, do look at things. So if Tri-County does not have an equivalent to a certain course that might fit in their typical first-year curriculum, we're looking at ways that we can make exceptions, or is there a Tri-County class that maybe is not exactly equivalent but would be a good substitute? So every year we're working with different colleges to do that. The last thing I would say is that because we are in such close proximity, we actually have the ability to send Clemson advisors and send Clemson faculty over to teach certain classes. So we recently, about a year and a half ago, started a packaging science course. We were seeing delayed graduation success in packaging science. And so we started a course at Tri-County for our introductory packaging science majors that helped get them on board so that their curriculum was more aligned. Now, it doesn't work for every single one. We see sometimes that majors like architecture and others who have studio time, it does delay their graduation a bit because that's just something that Tri-County doesn't have the capacity to offer at this time. But we're doing our best as much as possible to make sure that alignment is there.
Yeah, I would give, I think, a similar answer in many ways. Looking at our primary feeder institutions on an annual basis and trying to understand, all right, when students are coming over, what credits might they be losing? And for us, because engineering is such a large percentage of not only our own student body, but certainly of our transfer interest, many of those students have taken math classes that we don't even have equivalency for, right? That's not necessarily their fault. They came out of high school with Algebra 2 or maybe pre-calc, and they're needing to take some courses that, yes, it's true, like just don't map over into our curriculum. And so as Alexa said, it's not always a pure 2 to 2. We also have a number of we've created a number of pathway programs. So as Georgia Tech has gotten more selective, and one of the things that we've done is looked for ways to, instead of saying no, we've said not yet. And so if you go somewhere else for a year and you take 30 hours and we tell you exactly what to do, you'll be able to come over after that, right? So it is more of a 1+3. We also work with a number of HBCUs and other institutions, predominantly in the South, for what we call 3-2s, dual degree programs, right? So Morehouse and Spelman and Xavier and Howard and some of these. Those also don't always end up being pure 3-2s, the truth is, right? Because there may be some courses along the way that they were doing to earn a degree at that other institution. And then by the time they come over to Georgia Tech, they're already at 3.5 or sometimes 4, and then it's 2, right? But I think what she said at the end in particular is super helpful and important, and that is continuing to work with the institutions that you're consistently getting students from, and having those conversations, not only internally, having faculty continue to review what are our standards for awarding credit, right? I mean, and I'll say, even any of the links you share about Georgia Tech and anybody that goes on to do like their own homework, like we don't have this purely figured out. I'm not by any means saying that we are, we have a lot of work still to do. But we do have a group that's also meeting internally, which also has transfer students on it. So it's faculty members, staff members, and students, a transfer advisory committee, which I think is, again, a best practice to have, to look at those feeder schools, but also look at the student experience. Where is it that we can clean things up? And Honestly, I think that engaging faculty to, on an annual basis, take a really hard look at English 2, as an example, at Georgia Tech. Sometimes, honestly, we're a little persnickety about, what it is that you did at another institution, whether or not going to give credit for that. Is that really necessary or appropriate? We need to have that conversation if we seeing students that aren't, receiving that English 2 credit, from some institutions that are becoming larger feeders and that kind of thing. So I want to just sort of echo a little of what she said, and then also get a chance to mention that working committee that is students, faculty, and staff that are trying to, again, help, as you said, from application to matriculation to graduation.
This is great. This next question is for Alexa. For the Bridge program, I understand that students apply to Clemson but enroll at TCTC first. Are the two institutions connected, meaning do you use a shared student information system? Or how are the transcripts received at Clemson once the student finishes their classes?
So in regards to our data sharing, we're both banner campuses, but we do have separate data feeds. So we do send annual transcripts as a data feed that goes directly from Clemson to Tri-County. It's also how we send money. I see the second part of that is, how does financial aid work? How does everyone get paid? Our students, in terms of our data, our data transcripts go over a couple times a year from Tri-County to Clemson. So the students' semesterly grades go over, and even prior to that, the Bridge office, we just finished this this afternoon reviewing transcripts for all of our students. So we send out notes from the Bridge offices saying, hey, you're either on track or you're not on track. So at the student level, they know where they're sitting. And in terms of kind of informing them, will you maybe need summer in order to complete Bridge requirements? They have fall, spring, and the subsequent summer to complete Bridge requirements and meet that 30 and 2.5 GPA. We then send the data transcripts over. We work with our counterparts at Clemson to say, hey, here are students who are looking to enroll in a summer class at Clemson. They've finished their Bridge requirements and they need, for those architecture students, for example, they want to get a head start on those studio courses they didn't get in. So we work with them to get all of those data sharing resources in play. In regards to the financial aid, students do submit FAFSA for Clemson and Tri-County separately. So during their Bridge year, they submit FAFSA to Tri-County. And then when they get to Clemson and matriculate, they do the same thing at Clemson. So all of the money starts at Tri-County. Tri-County takes all of the payments for housing, for tuition and fees, for student resources, things like that. And that gets sent over to Clemson in a data feed twice a year. And so we just sent over our fall feed, and then we're going to send another one over in the spring. We do also share resources like hiring graduate students. So we hire a lot of graduate students from the higher ed program here at Clemson. Some of them support Bridge to Clemson on the Clemson side of the partnership, and some support them on the Tri-County side. So we share a lot of resources in that regard. That's also how we pay our partners, like our housing partners, dining, if our students are in any specific programs, like we have a program called Spectrum for students who are on the autism spectrum. So if they participate in any of these specialized programs, all of the money is collected through Tri-County and is sent over to Clemson, almost as like a reimbursement. So it's all part of that memorandum of understanding. We have to go through the process of getting the Board of Trustees at both campuses to approve fees and things like that. And so that's all outlined in our memorandum of understanding.
That is great. This next question is for the both of you. Both of you have shared that what your institutions are doing to improve the experience and success of transfer students. This person is curious about the larger context in which the institutions exist. are there any state level policies that have supported transfer students or that are a barrier for transfer students?
I can go real quick. One thing's coming to mind for me. So, state policy. Well, it's interesting in Georgia, right? Because the way that funding comes out. So we have 26 public institutions in our USG, University System of Georgia. We also have a technical system as well. And funding follows headcount. All right, so just follow me here for a second. Sorry, this is going to be a little bit wonky, but in other words, the number of new students you bring in is how the money essentially flows. The number of students you keep is how the money continues to flow. I think that as we look at this concept that's been floated in the past of reverse transfer, in other words, if an institution is part of a student's journey, even if the kid, let's say, does not earn an associate's degree at that community college or at that four-year university, they end up losing them to transfer over. In this case, let's say it's to Georgia Tech or Clemson or you name it, other four-year university. They go on to earn a bachelor's degree. The concept of reverse transfer would say, well, they could be also awarded and conferred an associate's degree, and that institution that supported them should be rewarded in many ways for being part of their journey. Or similarly, the same concept, right? Is that they're not losing them to not earn a degree. They're not losing them to not ultimately, move on somewhere else. They actually were a big part of the help, and they were a percentage of that student's credit. Let's say they were 26% of that student's ultimate credits earned to get a four-year degree. Well, could money flow back? And where I'm going with this on that side is that I believe, if that were the case, there would be more support at all institutions to take care of students who were coming to advisors early and saying, my goal is to move to University of Georgia. My goal is to move to Georgia Tech or you name it, other, four-year university, in a way that I think is maybe not the case currently, right? Of course, all institutions wants to see their students succeed, but if we could incentivize it through policy, incentivize it through the way money flows, and rethink maybe how headcount the best way for money to support institutions, ? That comes to mind for me. The other one is, and I don't know who all's on the call today, so I'm sure somebody in Florida or Texas or other places can shoot this down, but in Georgia, we do not have a common course numbering system. And that's a simple, clear, easy way. If you have a common course numbering system, then at Dalton State in Georgia, and that number, that course, everything's called the same. It's very easy to understand what that maps over to. And we do a lot of work to help students understand that, yes, what's called 1301 at your institution is ultimately 1500 here, but yes, that's the same class that you need. Call it something different, number something different, but that's the one we're talking about, right? And I do think that common course numbering is something we would probably benefit from. Understanding there's no panacea, understanding, again, somebody in Florida or California where they do have common course numbering might say, well, here's some of the issues with that. It's probably better than what we have. And I think it'd be a step in the right direction.
I would certainly echo that. That's a dream for us, is to have common course numbering. We don't have it right now. But South Carolina just recently, this past year, signed a statewide transfer agreement. So we do, I'm happy that reverse articulation came up. One of the things before this statewide articulation came up, Bridge was kind of a pioneer to help start looking at the transfer articulation pathway. Similarly to Georgia Tech, we don't have everything down. We're constantly trying to review, but one of the things that we saw was what other ways can Tri-County benefit from the relationship with us? And one of the things that we wanted to see was that reverse articulation happen. So we're able, even after the students have completed their sophomore year at Clemson, send back feeds to Tri-County so that students can be awarded their associate's degrees.
That's great.
And so
That's
it's
great.
definitely a process that's been a long time coming. And I know with the state of South Carolina and the state technical college system, it's a work in progress, but it's certainly a step in the right direction for our students with all the public universities in the state. And we have a pretty robust technical college system. And there is a lot of social inadequacies between the different counties in our state. And so a lot of our local support and funding resources are looking to target some of those underrepresented populations to ensure that the state of South Carolina as a whole is being represented at our public institutions. And this is a great step in the right direction.
That is great. Could both of you all just kind of like highlight it? I believe both of you may have mentioned it, but specifically this next question is, do you have a specific data sharing agreement in place with the community college for student level information? If so, what types of data are you sharing?
So with the Bridge program, our students, because they apply to Clemson, they never directly apply to Tri-County. So when they get the offer from Clemson, it says that they are getting an offer to do the Bridge program. And in order for us to share information and initiate that shared information to Tri-County, the students have to express interest, consent to be in the program. So when they are expressing interest, that opens huge doors for us to be able to share personal information, things like that. The one thing that they do directly with both institutions is share social security numbers. We don't share that across, but everything else we share through those data feeds. So our partners at Tri-County know where they live. They know what their scores are, things like that. One of the things I can say right now that we're still having to work on is the sharing of AP, IB scores, things like that. We have, all of those, the students pay to have those scores sent. So that is something right now that we are not able to share, and we do have to have the students send it to both institutions. And we've been working with admissions at both campuses to try and figure out, is there a way around that, because we don't want that financial burden on our students if possible. But we do waive our application fees and things like that when they come over to Clemson. They do pay orientation fees because the students do have to do orientation twice, both at Clemson and at Tri-County, because there's onboarding processes. One thing I will say about it that's unique to our Bridge students is they feel like they really know Clemson, but when they start their sophomore year, there are a lot of things they still don't know. So while they feel like they don't need orientation and things like that, that is where they register for their first semester's coursework and all of that. So they do all of those things. But in terms of the data sharing, we provide as much information as possible. And that includes immunization records, and all of the things in between. So they have access to our health center here at Clemson. We also share their conduct records. So if a student is, defaulting on their payments, or they are, getting into trouble that they shouldn't be, we're sharing even our care resources. So when if a care report comes in for a student of concern, we're sharing that with Tri-County so that the appropriate resources at both campuses can be in the process. The only other thing that we do not share is our student accessibility office. If a student needs accessibility resources, if it's academic, they go to Tri-County. If it is regarding their housing or things like that, they would go to Clemson. So there are certain things that we do keep separate for protection rights, but we share as much as possible, and the students consent to that when they agree to be in the program.
So just
great.
real quick follow-up, Alexa.
Yeah.
In terms of the academic accessibility,
Mhm.
is student still responsible to make sure the Clemson professors know, being the fact that there is no data coming over from Tri-County?
They do have to redo all of their paperwork once they get to Clemson, yes. So when they set up their initial accommodations at Tri-County, they get those resources, they have to self-disclose. And then when they get to Clemson, we do make sure as we are helping them transition that that information is in there. They do have to reach out to Clemson directly to set up those accessibility resources. And to be honest, both institutions have their own levels of care and standards. So some things that they might have gotten accommodations for at Tri-County may not be the same at Clemson and vice versa. So that's something that we just forewarn students about, that may not always align 100%.
Rick, I'm going to say the question one more time so people know what you're answering.
Yep.
So do you have a specific data sharing agreement in place with any other institution? And if so, what types of data are you sharing?
We do not, so that's gonna be a pretty quick answer. But what I would say is, I mean, partly, hopefully, I'm offering something of value today, but more than anything, I'm just taking notes on what Alexa's saying, because we are just starting a program, and I can share a link. Which, of course, and I'm just going to be honest, we totally stole the name Bridge from Clemson anyway, with Atlanta Metropolitan State College, which is also 4 miles from Georgia Tech's campus. So this will be the first year that we're initiating this program. And even as she's talking, I'm writing down notes because this is going to be a huge part of what we're needing to figure out, right? Is how, and it was just on a campus, it was just on their campus earlier this week, having some of these exact conversations. How are our systems going to talk to each other? When are we going to send information back and forth? What can we send back and forth based on, FERPA and other various, stipulations? The other thing I would just say is, since I can't be a great resource on this, I did also have a very good conversation with Jamie Valdez at Florida International. And they have a program called Connect for Success, which partners with Broward County Community College. And I was asking her some of those same questions. So I will not talk anymore since I don't have anything of great value to say, other than it's a very important question. And I do think that Alexa and possibly Jamie, and I'm sure others around the country, have figured some of these things out. And we're going to be really leaning on them as we get into a situation, which we're initiating with our bridge program, where we're going to need to. Because to this point, honestly, all we've needed to get from students that are transferring is application transcripts, basic information. We have not had to have data sharing and bridging, to use the term again, back and forth between the two institutions.
This is great. We're moving into our last question just because of the time. So for both of you, what role does financial aid counseling play in supporting transfer students? And how can institutions improve access to these resources?
I would say financial aid plays a key factor. In full transparency, there are not as many financial aid resources, aside from FAFSA and things like that, for Bridge to Clemson students. They don't have access to the Clemson scholarships and things like that because they're enrolled Tri-County students. Now, with that being said, we feel that it's most important to ensure that the students understand what they are signing up for. If they've applied to Clemson, they already kind of have an idea of the financial barriers that they are potentially coming up on. So for us, we feel that it's essential to have a very clear outlined fee schedule that is produced when we do our information sessions as students are considering Bridge to Clemson. Those fee schedules are already outlined in all of our print materials. And we try to make everything online as clear and accessible as possible. We also, Tri-County has a very dedicated office where they answer phones. They have people in the office that people can stop in and talk to them. I would say even compared to Clemson, they are very accessible when students have questions, and they will pick up the phone and answer. So in regards to different resources that are available. There are small scholarships that students can apply for, and we talk about aid. South Carolina also has the LIFE program that really helps our students, especially if they're pursuing STEM initiatives. So we have as many informed people as possible and just folks that are available to walk them through that process.
Yeah, I guess what I would say there is, earlier you asked about, like, I think the most important thing, and we were talking about clear transfer credit articulation. And I stand behind my answer. But financial aid is like 1.2 on that, because having, again, a clear understanding, because when students, we're a R1 university, so we're a research classification, and in Georgia that means that our tuition is higher than it is at pretty much any other place that students are transferring from, unless they're coming from one of the other research universities. And so right off the bat, there's going to be, cost difference. We also have a lottery funded scholarship in our state, Hope and Zell Miller scholarship, right? So the ability and availability of solid, consistent, clear financial aid counseling from the very beginning is just so critical. And what we found is that, yes, Zoom hours, physical office hours and availability, very important. But also getting our financial aid counselors out to our primary feeder schools is also really critical. Not only once the students have been admitted or are in the process of applying, but even as they're just simply considering this, because we don't want them to go all the way through this entire process only to find, that they haven't been able to also align the affordability side, right? So this idea of admission without affordability is not really access. Is something that we're really trying to kind of lean into as a general philosophy. The other thing I just want to put out there is, for instance, we're in the middle of a capital campaign right now and trying to raise money around need-based aid. And one of the things we've been talking to our donors about and talking to people that are engaged with this campaign about is, if 1 out of every 4 of our new students are transfer students, should 1 out of every $4 be allocated to transfer students, right? Similarly, we have something called the Tech Promise program. And if you're familiar with UNC, the Carolina Covenant, it's modeled after that. Carolina Covenant's like the exemplar in the space. But for us, first year Georgia students whose families are making $55,000 or less guarantee a debt-free Georgia Tech education. We're trying to get this to the point where we can say that for all Georgians, since almost 3/4 of our transfer students are coming from our state, right? And we've done and run the models to say, if we were to have Tech Promise already for transfer students, how many would qualify? And that number is not insignificant, that are already there, that have somehow made it work, but are falling, at a threshold that's fairly low. And so I think that's a culture change for most institutions, especially most 4-year institutions, is to really think about, not just the stuff that should be done and needs to be done and probably is being done, availability, good counseling, clear information, but on the macro level, how are you funding and prioritizing transfer students? Because historically and traditionally in most of these institutions, it has taken a backseat. It has not been part of the true enrollment management strategy. Maybe it is in headcount, but not so much on financial aid. And those two things just have to sync up.
I'm gonna pass it back to Waverly.
Yes, because we are almost at time, and I wish we could keep this conversation going. So thank you, Rick. Thank you, Alexa. Thank you, David, for this wonderful and generative conversation. I think our attendees have a lot to mull over and have gotten a lot of great information and some great links in our chat. Before closing today's discussion, the Hunt Institute is sharing our link to upcoming webinars. So that should be in the chat now. And please join our newsletter if you haven't already, and we'll send out updates on future webinars through that newsletter. And I just wanted to plug our January webinar. It's focused on diverse pathways into higher education. But again, thank you all for joining us today. We hope to see you again soon. Have a great one, y'all.